My sister snapped, "You've always been the problem." And Mom agreed things were better before I came back. So I said, "I know you've been trying to take over the house, but you'll have to do better than that." I'm 29, and last night I walked out of my childhood home for what I'm pretty sure is the last time. To be honest, I never really planned on coming back. After college, I stayed out of state, hopping from city to city, chasing whatever job would pay enough to let me avoid asking my family for help. I'd call during the holidays, maybe send a gift card or two, but I kept my distance. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. If you've ever had one of those families where guilt is a language and silence is a weapon, you'll get it. Every conversation with my mom was a tightrope walk over landmines. Every visit was a performance. And my sister Marissa? Let's just say she's always been the golden child, with teeth so white you'd think they were forged in heaven, and a passive-aggressive tone sharp enough to slice steel. But a few months ago, things changed. My dad got sick, liver failure. It got bad fast, and suddenly the family that had all but forgotten me remembered I existed. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the only one who can help. Never mind the years they spent reminding me how difficult I was. Never mind that I hadn't even been invited to Marissa's wedding 2 years ago. No. Now, I was essential. I flew home without hesitation, took unpaid leave, canceled a work trip I'd been planning for months. I didn't do it for them. I did it for my dad. He and I were never close exactly, but he never weaponized his disappointment the way Mom did. He just kind of existed in the background, tired and quiet, always working, always too exhausted to intervene. When he looked at me from that hospital bed, tubes in his arms and face pale as the walls around him, he whispered, "You didn't have to come back, kid. But I'm glad you did. I'll carry that with me forever." At first, I stayed in the guest room, helped with appointments, grocery runs, managed all the insurance paperwork that made my mom's eyes glaze over. I figured we'd bond a little, maybe heal, but I underestimated just how deep the old wounds ran and how determined my mother and sister were to keep picking at them. It started small, snide little comments at dinner. "You sure you should be making his meals, Daniel? He always said your cooking was a little bland. I thought you'd grow out of that tone by now." Guess not. Don't take this the wrong way, but maybe don't talk politics in front of Dad. You've always had a way of making things about you. I bit my tongue, told myself it wasn't worth it. Dad was the priority. Let it slide. But then came the little mistakes. My room being cleaned without asking, and personal stuff moved or misplaced. Mail addressed to me suddenly opened. Conversations I had with Dad somehow twisted by the time they reached Mom's ears. And always, Marissa would smile. That tight, gleaming smile, like I was just another mess she had to manage. One morning, I walked into the kitchen to find them whispering over coffee. They stopped when I entered. Mom looked at me like I was an uninvited guest. "Do you need something?" she asked. No warmth in her voice. "Just grabbing tea." Marissa laughed lightly. "Still drinking that weird stuff. Figures." I ignored them. But something shifted that day. I could feel it in the way they moved around me, like I was a guest who'd overstayed his welcome in a home I'd grown up in. Then came the real blow. It was a Tuesday night. Dad had had a rough day, and I'd stayed late at the hospital with him. He couldn't talk much anymore, just hand squeezes and quiet blinking. I sat beside him reading the newspaper out loud, like he used to do for me when I was a kid. When I got home, I found Marissa in the living room, arms crossed, waiting. "Can we talk?" she said sharply. "Sure." She didn't wait. "I think it's time you started looking for a place of your own." I blinked. "Excuse me? You've been here 2 months. And I mean, it's not like you're paying rent." I actually laughed, confused. "Are you serious? I've been handling Dad's paperwork, driving him to appointments. And we appreciate that," she said quickly. "But you're disrupting the peace. This isn't about gratitude. It's about balance." I stood there stunned. Balance. Mom entered then, drying her hands with a dish towel, and said, "Marissa's right. Things were better before you came back." That sentence, that exact sentence. Like someone had cracked a bat over my chest. I think I physically swayed. I opened my mouth, closed it, then nodded slowly. Picked up my keys from the table. "You've always been the problem," Marissa snapped as I turned toward the door. I paused for a second. Just a second. But didn't look back. I left without slamming the door. Without a single word. That was last night. I slept in my car, parked behind an old gas station outside of town. Windows cracked. Hoodie pulled over my head. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. I felt nothing. Hollowed out. A silent kind of ache that doesn't scream. It hums. This morning, my phone buzzed violently awake. 19 missed calls. 6 from Mom, 9 from Marissa, 1 from my uncle, 3 from a number I didn't recognize. And then the voicemail. It was Mom's voice. Thick with something I hadn't heard since I was a teenager. Regret. "Daniel, honey, listen. We were stressed. Marissa didn't mean..." A pause. A deep, shaking breath. "We made a mistake." Then a sob. One sharp enough to make me sit up straight in silence. I didn't know what to do. I still don't. But the thing is, I don't think they called because they miss me. I think they called because they realized what they've lost, and they have no idea what's coming next. I sat in the driver's seat for nearly half an hour after that voicemail ended, just staring at the dusty dashboard, listening to the low hum of traffic from the road behind the gas station. 19 missed calls. 1 tearful apology. But it wasn't the apology itself that got me. It was the timing. Because the truth is, Mom and Marissa only ever reach out when they need something, when things slip beyond their control. I knew that something had happened overnight, something big enough to rattle their perfect little fortress of pride. I replayed the message 3 more times. Each time, that last line hit harder. We made a mistake. It wasn't a confession. It was a warning. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I drove. I needed to move, think. Let the air hit my face. I ended up at a little coffee shop I used to go to in high school. Still had the same cracked leather seats and chalkboard menu with prices that hadn't caught up to inflation yet. I ordered the cheapest thing they had, took a seat in the corner, and pulled out my phone. That's when I saw the email. Subject line, "Change of primary contact, Emerson Health account." My heart dropped. I opened it. This email is to confirm the change of primary emergency contact and billing authority for patient Charles Monroe. The new primary contact is Marissa Hall. If you believe this is an error, please contact Emerson Health immediately. I felt my chest tighten. They were trying to push me out, not just from the house, but from everything. From Dad, from the decisions, from the one thing that still tied me to that family in a meaningful way. And they did it behind my back. The timeline clicked into place instantly. They must have filed the request yesterday, probably while I was at the hospital. Probably while I was sitting beside the man I'd sacrificed my job and my life for these past few months. That voicemail wasn't regret. It was desperation. They realized I still had access to things they didn't fully understand. And more importantly, they needed me to clean up a mess they just created. I logged into the hospital's patient portal. Dad's file was locked, access restricted. My profile was still listed as an authorized viewer, but my editing rights were gone. So was my billing access. So was everything I'd set up. But I still had something they didn't know about, something they forgot. A separate account I made under my name when I first started managing Dad's appointments. It was linked to the home care payments, and more importantly, it was tied to the financial support I'd been fronting quietly since day one. See, Marissa and my mom liked to act like they were the ones keeping things together. But without me, they'd be buried under a pile of unpaid invoices, bounced checks, and canceled services. The house was still technically under Mom's name, but the second mortgage? That was mine. The home nurse 3 times a week? Me. The delivery meals? Me. The upgraded hospital bed Dad needed to stay comfortable? Also me. I pulled up the banking app, opened the transactions. The autopay settings were still live. Still active. I hovered over the Suspend All Recurring Payments button, but I didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, I opened another folder, one I hadn't touched in weeks. It was something I started compiling out of habit. Dates, receipts, screenshots, voicemail, transcripts. I labeled it contingency. Back when I first arrived, I didn't trust them. I still don't. But that folder, it was my insurance policy, my quiet digital paper trail. And it were audio clips of conversations I'd accidentally walked into, like the time I overheard Marissa whispering to Mom, "Once Dad's gone, we sell the house. Daniel doesn't need to know until it's done." Or the email she sent to a real estate agent titled, "Exploring Options Post-Estate Finalization." She was planning ahead, not for Dad's care, but for his absence. That's what made my stomach turn. She didn't see this as a time to support him. She saw it as a countdown. And me? I was the inconvenient delay. By now, I knew what I had to do. But I wanted one more thing, proof that they weren't just greedy, that they were willing to lie outright to make me disappear. So I called the hospital. "Hi, this is Daniel Monroe. I'm trying to understand why I was removed as the primary contact for my father's care." There was a pause, a clicking of keys. Looks like the change was submitted yesterday afternoon, authorized by Marissa Hall. "Did she provide documentation?" Yes, a signed statement from your father." My blood went cold. "That's impossible," I said flatly. "Sir? He can't sign anything. He hasn't been able to for over a week. His right hand is paralyzed and his left arm has a catheter. There's no way." There was a silence on the line, then a cautious reply. "We'll escalate this to the compliance office immediately, sir." I hung up. My hands were shaking. They forged a signature. For what? Control? Closure? Or maybe just to make sure I wouldn't be in the room when the end came. I stared at my screen again, watched the cursor blink next to the Suspend All Payments button, but I didn't press it. Not yet, because cutting them off financially, that would be the easy part. But I wanted them to feel it first. Not just the consequences, but the reality. They wanted me out. Fine. But they were about to learn what life was really like without me. They just severed the one lifeline they couldn't afford to lose. And I hadn't even told them yet. I didn't call them back. I didn't text. Didn't reply to any of the messages still pouring into my phone. I just sat there in that worn-out coffee shop booth, watching the world pass by like it had no idea mine was on the verge of cracking wide open. My tea had gone cold. I hadn't even touched it. Instead, I started planning. I wasn't angry anymore, just sharp, focused. The kind of clarity that only comes after years of second-guessing yourself and finally realizing you were right the whole time. I knew my mom and sister well enough to predict their next moves. They'd scramble, panic, play victim if they had to. But most importantly, they'd try to salvage control. That was their addiction. Not power, not money, control. Of perception, of narrative, of whose side people saw. But I had the truth and the receipts. First, I backed up the entire contingency folder to multiple drives, one encrypted, one cloud. Then I forwarded the most damning files, those voice recordings and the real estate emails, to an old friend of mine, Clara. She was a lawyer. We hadn't talked in a while, but I knew she'd look over them without judgment. The email I sent her was short. "Need your eyes on this potential forgery and elder exploitation. Let me know what's legally actionable. D." I sent it, took a deep breath, and only then did I log into the banking app and freeze the payments. Not cancel. Not yet. Just enough to cause a ripple. Within an hour, the first text came in from Marissa. M. "Hey, did you pause something with the nurse service? They called saying the payment bounced." 5 minutes later, "Daniel, this isn't funny. You said you'd help. Dad needs the care." No apology, no explanation. Just that entitled tone that made it sound like I had dropped the ball. Another 20 minutes, and the hospital's financial office was calling. I let it go to voicemail. They were trying to confirm who was responsible for Dad's account. Perfect. Then came the call from my uncle, Mom's brother, Uncle Ray. "Daniel," he started, voice firm. "I just got off the phone with your mother. She's in hysterics. What is going on?" I leaned back in my car seat, letting the sun filter through the windshield. "What did she tell you?" "That you're threatening to cut off your dad's care over some family squabble. She says you're being vindictive." I almost laughed. She didn't mention the part where they forged a medical document to remove me from Dad's file. There was a long pause. What? "Yeah," I said calmly. "Hospital confirmed it, and I have a copy of the document. It's not even his handwriting. The man hasn't lifted a pen in 10 days. Another silence. Then, softer. Jesus Christ. She did it to gain control. Probably wanted to sell the house the second he's gone and get me out of the picture before I ask too many questions. I had no idea, he said quietly. No one ever does, I replied, because she's good at keeping things pretty on the outside. That's the whole family motto, isn't it? Smile for the neighbors, eat each other alive behind closed doors. He didn't argue. Look, kid, what do you need from me? That surprised me. I hadn't expected him to believe me so quickly. Just stay out of it for now. But if Mom or Marissa starts spinning a story about how I abandoned them, I need someone who knows better. You've got that, he said. And Daniel? Yeah? I always thought you were the only one with a conscience in that house. Don't let them convince you otherwise. I hung up without saying more. I didn't need to. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. I went back to the hospital the next day. Not to see Dad, but to meet with the compliance officer. Her name was Angela, and she looked like she'd seen this exact kind of family implosion more than a few times. She reviewed the forged document with a grim frown, then looked at me. This isn't even a convincing signature. I know, I said. This could qualify as medical fraud, especially if any decisions were made based on this document. I nodded. I don't want to press charges yet. I just want to make sure my father's care doesn't suffer because of this. We'll reinstate your access today, and we'll be putting a freeze on any further changes unless they're approved in person by a licensed physician and witnessed by staff. It was like finally breathing clean air. Later that afternoon, I sat at Dad's bedside again. He blinked slowly when I entered, his face more drawn than ever. I held his hand, careful of the IV lines. His grip was weak, but still there. They tried to push me out, I said quietly, but I'm still here. He squeezed my hand, barely, but it was enough. I've got you, Dad. I stayed there for a long time, just sitting, listening to the beeping monitors and the distant sounds of nurses passing by. The world felt quieter, calmer, until I got back to my car and saw the email from Marissa. Subject line, "You don't know what you've done." The body of the message was one long, frantic paragraph. No punctuation, just rage, blaming me for sabotaging the family, for ruining everything, for turning Uncle Ray against them. And finally, the one line that stood out. You always wanted to feel important. Well, congratulations. You've burned the last bridge you had. I stared at those words for a long time and smiled, because what she didn't know was that I'd already built a new bridge, one that didn't include her. And the fire she lit? It was still just getting started. I didn't respond to Marissa's email. Not a word. I didn't need to. Everything she'd written just confirmed what I already knew. I'd hit the fault line, the one they never thought I'd find, let alone shake. And now it was crumbling underneath them. Every fake smile, every lie, every smug little speech about family obligations, while they used me like a walking wallet with a driver's license. But what they didn't realize was that I had one final card to play, and I was done being quiet. 3 days after that email, I walked into the attorney's office with a folder under my arm. Not the contingency folder, a new one, titled simply, Care Transition. Clara had helped me draft it. She sat beside me as I met with the legal representative from Emerson Health and a neutral third-party advocate. And across the table sat my mom. She looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe just rattled. Her usual styled hair was pulled into a lazy bun, and she wore sunglasses indoors, even though it was cloudy. I assumed it was either from lack of sleep or to avoid looking at me directly. Marissa didn't show up. Coward. I placed the folder gently on the table. Inside is everything we need to initiate guardianship transfer for Dad's care, I said calmly. Effective immediately, I'll assume full legal responsibility for his health decisions, medical expenses, and palliative arrangements. Mom said nothing at first, just stared. Then she laughed softly, bitterly. You can't be serious. I am, I replied. You lost your say when you signed a forged document and submitted it as legal authority. That wasn't me, she snapped. That was Marissa. She said he approved it. He can't talk, Mom. And even if he could, you knew better. You've always known better. Her lips pressed into a tight line. Angela, the compliance officer from the hospital, spoke next. We reviewed the situation extensively. The evidence of signature fraud, combined with the testimony from Mr. Monroe and the care staff, meets the standard required to initiate legal reassignment of medical responsibility, pending a judge's approval. It's already been signed, Clara said smoothly, sliding another paper across the table. Filed yesterday morning with the hospital's support. Mom looked down at the document with wide eyes. You did this behind our backs, she whispered. No, I said calmly. I did this because of what you tried to do behind mine. She stood up, knocking her chair slightly. So that's it? You're cutting us out? After everything we've done? Everything I've done, I corrected. Paid the mortgage, paid for Dad's nurse, kept the electricity running, while you two hosted book clubs and posted selfies about how grateful you were to be present during Dad's illness. I let the words hang. Meanwhile, you were planning what color curtains to hang in the guest room after he passed. Her face paled. You think I didn't see that Zillow tab open on your laptop? I added. Or the calendar alert titled Freedom Day on your phone, set for a month from now? Tears welled in her eyes. But they weren't grief. Not shame, just anger. Anger that the mask had slipped, and there was nothing left to hide behind. I stood too. Dad has weeks, maybe less. From now on, his final days will be peaceful. No more schemes, no more tension, just quiet dignity. And maybe, just maybe, some honesty. I'm still his wife, she said. And I'm still his son, I replied. But only one of us has acted like family. I walked out without another word. The next few days passed in a strange, heavy silence. There were no more frantic calls, no angry texts, just quiet. Maybe they finally understood. Maybe they just didn't know what to say. I visited Dad every morning, sat beside him, played soft music, read the newspaper, even when he couldn't follow, held his hand when he winced, brushed his hair when he slept. I told him stories about my childhood, about how I used to climb into his truck when I was little, just to pretend I was going somewhere important. One evening, I brought in a box of old photos I'd dug out of storage, mostly faded prints, camping trips, birthdays, beach vacations. And then, near the bottom, I found one I hadn't seen in years. It was me, maybe 8 years old, sitting on his shoulders, both of us covered in paint, a failed attempt at fixing up the garage. We were laughing, real laughter. I showed it to him. He blinked twice. Then slowly, achingly, he reached up, placed his finger on the photo, and tapped it once. I knew what that meant. He remembered. That night, he passed peacefully. No machines. No chaos. Just me sitting beside him, his hand in mine. I stayed a long time after they took him away, long enough to watch the sun rise through the window. And then I went home. My home. The funeral was small, by choice. Just a few friends, some old co-workers of his, my Uncle Ray, and one or two neighbors who actually cared. Marissa came dressed like she was auditioning for a soap opera. Dramatic black veil, crocodile tears. She tried to give a eulogy, but I shut that down, politely but firmly. Dad asked me to speak, I said. A lie. But no one questioned it. And so I did. I spoke about quiet strength, about a man who didn't always say the right thing, but tried to do the right thing, about what it meant to show up, even when no one expected you to. Afterward, she tried to approach me. Daniel, I don't want to talk, I said. Not today. Not with you. She blinked like she'd been slapped. But we're family. No, I said. We're related. That's not the same thing. She didn't follow me. The house was sold a month later. Legally, it was mine after the guardianship shift. I gave Mom 60 days to move out. No lawyer, no drama. I even let her take most of the furniture. She left on day 59. No goodbye. Just a silent exit and an empty keyring left on the counter. I stood in the doorway after she left. The place looked different, smaller. Not because the furniture was gone, but because it no longer held any illusions. Just space. And for the first time in years, peace. It's been 8 months now. I'm back in my city. Got my job back. Even picked up painting again. Something Dad always wanted me to do more of. My apartment's small, but it's mine. My walls are quiet. My time is my own. Sometimes I still get calls from family, mostly cousins, a few uncles. They don't ask about Mom or Marissa. They ask about me. They say they heard what happened. They say they're sorry. I say thank you, and that I'm doing okay, because I am. I used to think cutting people off was cruel, harsh, unforgivable. But now I know It's not always about punishment. Sometimes it's just about healing, about reclaiming the space someone else poisoned. Dad's last words to me before he lost his speech completely were simple. You did right. I carry those with me. And every time I doubt myself, I remember, I didn't walk away from my family. I just stopped walking toward people who never once took a step in my direction.